allowing impeachment to cross over Congresses is consistent with American practice.
Magkaiba yung sa Philippine Senate at US Senate kasi ang naiiwan sa US Senate tuwing mag-eleksyon ay 67 senators, enough to constitute a quorum out of 100 senators and enough to convict or acquit. Sa atin po, 12 lang. Not enough to have a quorum of 13, more so a number of 16 to convict or acquit.
Following the practice of the United Kingdom, Thomas Jefferson's Manual of Parliamentary Practice states that an, quote, impeachment is not discontinued by the dissolution of Parliament, but may be resumed by the new Parliament, close quote. The following impeachment proceedings extended from one Congress to the next.
Just to reiterate again, yung nabanggit ko po kanina nga, magkaiba yung sa Philippine Senate at US Senate kasi ang naiiwan sa US Senate tuwing mag-eleksyon ay 67.
Well, Mr. President, it was just, ito lang for the consumption of our staff and secretariat. It was just pointed out to me that the rule that we mentioned earlier, second paragraph of Rule 3, yung first paragraph pala, it provides that nakapag-oath na. Nakapag-oath na ang member. So if that is now the dividing line, we have crossed the line. So, Senate na po ito as a court. So, tingnan na lang po muli, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Your Honor, the first paragraph refers to consideration of the articles of impeachment. The second paragraph, we were not part of the Senate that wrote these rules. The first paragraph, it mentions the word consideration. The second paragraph mentions the word presentation. In terms of time, presentation should come first before consideration, although as it appears in our rules, consideration was mentioned first in the first paragraph and before presentation in the second paragraph. But in terms of order, Your Honor, presentation should logically come first before consideration of the articles of impeachment.
And then
there is nothing to consider unless presented.
And then in the next breath, it talks about the trial na.
Yes, again, we had no part in writing these rules.
Okay,
I
so
would not want to critique it as well because during those times, perhaps, this was apt and sufficient.
So, okay, so Mr. President, maybe now, kasi ang media nagtatatanong sa akin, pinapa-speculate pa ako na, just for the record, what is now the reason that His Honor has taken the initiative to reset the June 2, 2025 4 p.m. appearance of the panel of prosecutors before the Senate plenary to June 11 4 p.m. What's the main reason
addressed to Speaker Martin, copy furnished to all of the senators as well as Vice President Sara Duterte. Given the meeting we had at LEDAC with His Honor's presence, several bills needed to be approved and taken up before we finally finish and wind up the 19th Congress. Meaning to say some bills need to be approved on second reading within the week today so that we can do third reading next week. Some bills have to be approved on third reading today and within this week so that bicameral conference committees can finalize and iron out the disagreeing provisions between the Senate and House versions so that we would still have time next week to either ratify these bicameral conference committee reports or still do third reading in compliance with the constitutional requirement of 3 readings on 3 separate days, at least 3 days after it's approved on second reading.
So, sige, last question na lang, Mr. President. Per our rules or practice, how would we now react to the receipt of the articles of impeachment last February 5, 2025? How should the Senate, as a legislative body in plenary session, react to that receipt?
In line with Article 1 of our impeachment rules, which makes mention of the authority and responsibility of the President of the Senate, that is why I set the schedule for the articles to be read in plenary, which in turn would trigger, if at all, the creation of the impeachment court, which, if at all, would now proceed with the issuance of summons for the respondent or defendant.
Would not the impeachment complaint received last February 5, 2025 be included in the reference of business?
Reference of business o hindi? Calendar.
Ano ito? Ito ba yung person versus them?
It will be included in the reference of business, yes. Supposedly today, kung natuloy tayo today, but on June 11, so that it can be included in the agenda for that particular day.
That's my point, Mr. President. Kung i-reference of business, why are we not doing it today? Anong damage kung gawin natin today?
Pwede rin naman. Hindi pa tayo nagbabasa ng reference
Yes,
of
yun
business.
na nga. Sure.
Pero wala no?
Are we doing it today? Kasi February 5 pa yun. That's why I'm mentioning the date that it was received, February 5. So, can we include it in the reference of business today? Kasi parang mas normal Mas normal yun Kung
We will look into it, Your Honor. I tend to agree with this Honor's position. We will take it up with the Secretary.
It's just normal, Mr.
Yes,
President.
yes.
Received last February 5, you're reporting out today. Okay?
Off the record, they explained the reason behind it. But I tend to agree with Your Honor, and I'll ask the Secretary to consider it. Because in the past, as they said, it was the majority leader who read it and not the prosecutors, supposedly. So it was included in the reference of business, referred to the Rules Committee, and the majority leader was the one who reported it out, quote unquote. But now, given that it's the prosecutors that will read the articles of impeachment, again, following U.S. practice and precedent, the Secretary thought it best that it'll be included in the agenda on that day because there is no referral to the Committee on Rules. But again, we will look into it and we will take the suggestion of the gentleman in light of the points he raised in connection with that.
Because I believe there should have been also a letter accompanying the impeachment complaint. There must have been a cover letter from the House. So, parang ganon. So we can...
Only by the section, not by the Speaker nor any member of the House.
Yes. But is a letter from the SecGen also a communication from the House?
It was a covering letter only.
Yeah. So I think this is just an opinion.
I tend to agree, Your Honor.
It's more natural that we report out if something happened last February 5, late in the session on February 5. Something happened, we report it out. So it's more natural if we report it out immediately, Mr. President. So
I tend to agree, Your Honor.
That's
Again,
my point, Mr. President.
I will take it up with the committee secretary.
So with that, Mr. President, I thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I just wanted to request some information. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Your Honor. What is the pleasure of the Honorable Hontiveros?
Salamat, Tabi, Mr. President. Gusto kong magdagdag ng point dun sa binanggit pareho ng majority leader, ng minority leader, at pati ng Senate President, yung references sa US practice and precedent. Kaugnay nung isa sa mga issue na pinag-usapan dito sa floor, kung pwede ba o dapat bang mag-carry over yung impeachment process mula sa 19th Congress hanggang sa 20th Congress. And I would just like to put this on the record, Mr. President. Galing po ito sa isang piyesa authored ni UP Professor Paulo Tamase, nag-appear po sa June 2025 issue ng Philippine Law Journal. Sabi po dito, Emerging Issues in Impeachment, page 19 dun sa journal, allowing impeachment to cross over Congresses is consistent with American practice. Following the practice of the United Kingdom, Thomas Jefferson's Manual of Parliamentary Practice states that an, quote, impeachment is not discontinued by the dissolution of Parliament, but may be resumed by the new Parliament, close quote. The U.S. Congress na binanggit ng majority leader, ng minority leader at ng Senate President, the US Congress has observed this for over 200 years. From the 1803 impeachment of Judge John Pickering to that of Judge Porteus in 2009. In Congress, impeachment proceedings are not discontinued by a recess. The following impeachment proceedings extended from one Congress to the next. 5 pong halimbawa, Mr. President, sa article na ito. Babangkitin ko lang yung pang-apat kasi yun pamilyar sa ating mga Pilipino. 4. The impeachment of President Clinton was presented to the Senate after the Senate had adjourned sine die. After, Mr. President, the Senate had adjourned sine die for the 105th Congress, and the Senate conducted the trial in the 106th Congress, Mr. President. So, for the record lamang po, dahil very, very pertinent sa binanggit ng majority leader, ng minority leader, at pati ng Senate President na following US practice and precedent. And with one very recent concrete example po dun sa impeachment ni US President Clinton. So I hope that we can consider this in our own decision-making, Mr. President, even after the rescheduled presentation by the House prosecutors to the Senate as an impeachment court on 11th June. Salamat tabi, Mr. President.
Duly noted and entered into the records. Majority Floor Leader.
Just to reiterate again, yung nabanggit ko po kanina nga, magkaiba yung sa Philippine Senate at US Senate kasi ang naiiwan sa US Senate tuwing mag-ieleksyon ay 67 senators, enough to constitute a quorum out of 100 senators and enough to convict or acquit. Sa atin po, 12 lang. Not enough to have a quorum of 13, more so a number of 16 to convict or acquit. But be that as it may, Mr. President, we have all the discussions done, and I think this would really be part not just of the discussions that whatever case would be elevated to the Supreme Court would eventually be decided in the near term. Mr. President, I seek a minute suspension, Mr. President.